My name is Soichiro, founder of Honda Motor Company. Known for turning post-war scrap metal into a global powerhouse of engineering, I once said, "Success is 99% failure," and I meant every word. Tonight, I will tell you the story of my life. Sorry, I'm not American, I'm a Japanese man. Born in a mountain village, raised among the clang of hammers and the scent of oil. And today, please allow me to use English to tell my story. You know, the first time I saw a car, I was just a boy. 8 years old. The world was silent, and then this thing came rumbling through our village like a metal beast from another world. It smelled strange. It growled. It had no horses. And yet it moved. I ran after it barefoot, laughing, my heart pounding not from the chase, but from awe. That memory lives somewhere deep behind my eyes. If you were me, would you have stopped running? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you could send a message to me in the past, what would you write? Leave a comment below. Now listen to this interesting story about my life journey. I was born in 1906 in the village of Komyo, in Tenryu District, Shizuoka Prefecture. A quiet place. My father, Gihei, was a blacksmith and later ran a bicycle repair shop. He was a man with rough hands and soft eyes. I remember how he used to hammer metal into tools and how sparks would dance like fireflies around him. I used to help pump the bellows. My job was to keep the fire alive. Looking back, maybe that's what I've always done. Keep the fire alive. We were poor, yes, but not unhappy. My mother, Mika, stitched our clothes by hand. She was calm and practical, the opposite of me. I was loud, curious, always covered in grease. I made toy airplanes from scrap tin. Once tried to make a working pedal-powered machine by dismantling a family heirloom. That didn't go well. But I learned early that mistakes are just the skin of innovation. Peel it away, and there's always something beautiful underneath. School and we didn't get along. I didn't hate it, but my mind wandered. I'd draw engines in the margins of my notebooks. I'd stare out the window, imagining machines that hadn't been built yet. I failed my exams more than once. But ask yourself, do grades always measure potential? If you were a parent, and your child brought home nothing but smudged, engine-greased pages, would you scold them or smile? One day, my father let me help repair a customer's bicycle. I can still feel the texture of that worn-out chain, the subtle resistance of the gears. When the bike finally rolled smooth again, the customer laughed with delight, and something in me lit up. Not just pride, purpose. It was around then I first saw that car, the foreigner's vehicle on the dusty village road. No one knew its name, just the car. The villagers all came out to watch. That moment, it seared itself into me like hot steel. I didn't understand combustion or torque or bearings, but I understood possibility. And I knew I would follow that sound wherever it led. Now imagine you're me. You're a barefoot country boy who's seen nothing but rice fields and wooden carts. Suddenly, you glimpse the future. Would you chase it? Even if the road ahead is long, lonely, and full of sharp turns? At 15, I left everything behind. My village, my parents, even the sound of the forge. I boarded a train to Tokyo with no money, no proper education, and no plan except this: learn about cars. My father gave me a handwritten note. I still remember his words. If your heart believes, your hands will follow. He didn't stop me. He didn't say goodbye. He just nodded. That was enough. So I went to Tokyo. Not the Tokyo you know now, but a chaotic, smoky city still finding its legs in the modern world. I found work under a man named Art Shokai, a mechanic who agreed to take me in, not as an employee, but as a broom boy. I swept floors, I fetched tea, I polished the wrenches of older mechanics. At night, I slept on a pile of rags under the tool bench. But I was watching, listening. Every clang of metal was a sentence. Every oil change was a lecture. My school was the shop. My textbooks were busted engines. If you were me, dirty, exhausted, and often ignored, would you stay? Or go back to the quiet life? I stayed. There were no shortcuts. I cut my fingers, burned my hands, got yelled at more times than I can count. But I never stopped asking questions. I began learning how to take apart engines, and more importantly, how to put them back together. One day, one of the senior mechanics fell ill, and I stepped in. I rebuilt a gearbox on my own. The car worked. They started calling me Soichiro the monkey, because I was always hanging off machines, even upside down. But it was an insult. It was a kind of respect. I didn't know it then, but this would become the foundation of my life. Get your hands dirty, listen to the machine, and never, ever stop learning. I suppose even now, looking back, that's the best advice I can give. No matter your age or where you come from, keep learning. Keep doing. Stay curious. That's the beginning of my story. A boy from a forge chasing the sound of a machine. And that chase, well, it was just beginning. Tokyo is loud. Even back then, in the 1920s, it had its own kind of rhythm. Not the honk of horns or the hum of neon signs like today, but clattering handcarts, the hissing of coal furnaces, the hammering of tools, and the voices of ambition echoing down narrow alleyways. I was right in the middle of it, sweeping the floors of Art Shokai, dreaming of engines. My apprenticeship began the way most apprenticeships do, with humility. I was nothing, no status, no schooling. But I had two good hands, sharp eyes, and an eagerness that bordered on desperation. I wanted to learn everything, and I mean everything, about how cars worked. Why one gear slipped and another caught. Why an engine purred instead of coughed. Why some cars seemed to run forever, while others sputtered out like dying candles. If you were me back then, still just a teenager, lungs full of soot and fingers raw from metal shavings, would you keep going? Or would you say, this isn't what I imagined? My answer was always the same. Keep going. The owner of the garage, Yuzo Sakakibara, was a strict man, but fair. He saw my hunger and let me stay, not just as a floor sweeper, but as a mechanic in training. He once told me, Soichiro, tools are just extensions of your fingers, but you must train your mind to see problems before your hands try to fix them. That lesson stayed with me. The best mechanics don't just fix what's broken, they anticipate what will break next. One day, a customer brought in a car with a strange issue. No matter how many times the others looked at it, they couldn't find the cause of the clanking noise in the engine. I watched silently, then asked, could it be a misaligned valve rod? The room went quiet. I was just a boy, still in my dirty apron. But they checked. I was right. I'll never forget that moment. The way they looked at me differently afterward. Not as a nuisance, as a mechanic. After that, I was entrusted with more. I rebuilt engines, tuned carburetors, and even worked on imported cars, vehicles most Japanese had never seen before. Each time I opened a new machine, it felt like lifting the lid on a secret. Machines don't lie. They tell you exactly what's wrong if you know how to listen. But it wasn't all sparks and victories. There were late nights with no food. There were freezing winters where my breath turned to mist inside the garage. There were days I questioned everything. Once I nearly burned a customer's car by misrouting the fuel line. The shame I felt nearly broke me. I almost packed my bag and ran back home. But I didn't. Instead, I bowed deeply to my boss and said, "I will learn from this. I will not make the same mistake twice." And I didn't. That's how you grow. Not by avoiding failure, but by standing back up after it humbles you. If you were me, with your pride burned and fingers trembling, would you face that fire again? I did. In my free time, what little I had, I began building my own ideas, tinkering, modifying old bicycles with small engines, dreaming of a new kind of vehicle, light, simple, powerful. Most of my experiments failed. My neighbors probably thought I was crazy. But you see, when I looked at a machine, I didn't see metal. I saw motion, dreams, escape. That's what invention is. A refusal to accept what is in favor of what could be. There was also something else in Tokyo. Speed. The men at Art Shokai loved to race. We'd modify cars, take off the heavy parts, rebalance the wheels, tune the engines, and push them to the edge on winding dirt roads. I wasn't old enough to drive, not legally, but I learned everything about racing by watching. Eventually, I got behind the wheel myself. The first time I raced, the world went quiet. Only the wind and the roar of the engine mattered. There was no fear, just focus. That thrill. It got into my blood. In those years, I learned that racing wasn't just about going fast. It was about knowing the limits of the machine, yes, but also of yourself. How far can you push? When do you back off? When do you take the corner? Those lessons, discipline, instinct, risk, would come back again and again in my life. I stayed in Tokyo for over 6 years. By the time I returned home to Hamamatsu in 1928, I was no longer a boy. I was 22. I had grease-stained hands, a mind filled with blueprints, and a heart full of ideas. I had spent those years absorbing everything I could from the world of machines, and now I was ready to create something of my own. I started thinking about my own shop, a place where I could not just repair cars, but build them, race them, test them. A place where I could chase that sound again, the sound of progress. Let me ask you, if you were me, having spent years living beneath a tool bench, barely scraping by, but now holding real knowledge in your hands, would you stay in the safe job or risk everything to start something of your own? I chose the risk. I always chose the risk. And as you'll see, it wasn't the last time I would. When I returned to Hamamatsu in 1928, the streets were quiet compared to Tokyo. No roaring engines, no flashing machines. But in that silence, I saw space. Space to build, space to try, space to make my own mark. With the little money I had saved from my apprenticeship, I opened my first garage, Art Shokai Hamamatsu branch. Yes, I used the same name as my Tokyo mentor, out of respect. I didn't just want to fix cars. I wanted to transform them, improve them, understand every inch of them. My dream was never to be rich. My dream was to build something that worked so perfectly it made people smile. At first, the shop was small, just me and a few friends. We took on everything from broken bicycles to sputtering American Fords. Most people in the town didn't even own cars, but word began to spread. Go to Honda. He listens to the machine. I was still young, wild even. I wasn't afraid to take apart engines just to see if there was a better way to build them back. I stayed up through the night sketching designs, experimenting with metal alloys, and tuning engines by ear. I wasn't following manuals. I was writing my own. If you were me, would you do it by the book? Or trust your gut? I trusted my gut. Every time. But I didn't just fix other people's cars. I started racing again, with my own team. I'd build the car, drive it, break it, fix it, and then race again. Each failure taught me something. Once, we lost a race because the pistons overheated. I didn't blame luck. I redesigned the cooling system. Another time, the brakes gave out. I switched to a better compound. That's how you win. Not by blaming, but by learning. One of our most ambitious projects was mounting a military aircraft engine into a car chassis. It was loud, fast, and dangerous. But when it worked, it was glorious. I can still hear the echo of that engine screaming down the dirt road, the wind in my face, the trees blurring past like ghosts. That car didn't just move, it roared. People said we were crazy. I said, maybe so. But crazy built this engine. We began to win races. People noticed. We started to attract attention from Tokyo, from Nagoya, from everywhere. But success didn't soften me. I still worked with my sleeves rolled up. I still yelled when something didn't sound right. I still chased perfection like a madman. And then came the day that changed everything. We entered the All-Japan Speed Rally, a major event. I had spent months preparing the car, tuning, testing, rebuilding every component. On race day, I took the wheel. The road was winding, full of gravel and danger. I remember every turn. I pushed that car beyond its limits. I was flying until I wasn't. A tire blew at high speed. The car flipped. I was thrown. My arm broke. My face was cut. I should have died, but I didn't. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, I had time to think. Not about the pain, but about the why. Why did I do this? Why push so hard? Was it pride? No. It was something deeper. It was love. Love for movement. Love for machines. Love for progress. People told me to give up racing. It's too dangerous, they said. You've proven your point. But if you were me, staring at the ceiling, listening to your own breath, would you stop doing what you love? Or would you find a smarter way to keep going? I chose the second path. I didn't stop. I evolved. That's when I began dreaming of making my own parts. Not just tuning, not just fixing, but manufacturing. Pistons, crankshafts, valves, not just for race cars, but for the cars of the future. Stronger, lighter, more efficient, and that was the next step. So I started studying metallurgy. I didn't go to university. I couldn't afford that. But I read every book I could find. I tested metal by heating it, bending it, breaking it. I learned which alloys could survive pressure, which ones cracked under heat. My neighbors must have thought I'd gone mad, banging on metal in the middle of the night, mumbling about tensile strength. And that's how the idea of Tokai Seiki Heavy Industry was born, my piston ring company. But that part of the story, I'll tell you in the next section. Let me leave you with this. Sometimes, the road that looks like it leads to disaster is actually guiding you toward your purpose. That crash, that hospital bed, that pain, it wasn't the end. It was a beginning. So if life ever throws you into a ditch, if you find yourself broken and doubting, ask yourself, is this my ending? Or is this my ignition? Because when you're driven by love, not just ambition, you'll always find a way to start the engine again. After that crash, something inside me shifted. The thrill of racing never left, but now there was another engine humming beneath my ribs, an urge to create from the ground up. Not just tune or repair, but to manufacture. To build pieces that could power not just cars, but an entire new future. That was the birth of my next venture. Piston rings. Simple things, right? Thin metal loops that seal combustion chambers in engines. Most people never think about them, but to me they were a key to something greater. Reliability, efficiency, progress. I believed if I could perfect that one piece, I could lay the foundation for something big. I started Tokai Seiki Heavy Industry in the early 1930s. I was in my late 20s, young, full of fire, and completely underestimating how hard it would be. The process of making a piston ring wasn't just bending metal. It required precise metallurgy, temperature control, and a deep understanding of internal combustion mechanics. I didn't have any of that. So I did what I always did. I failed. Over and over. The first rings I made were garbage, brittle, warped, weak under heat. I sold a few, but when I submitted samples to Toyota, they rejected them. Not once, not twice, over 30 times. If you were me, each rejection like a slap to the face, would you keep showing up? I did. But I realized I needed more than passion. I needed education. So I swallowed my pride and enrolled as a part-time student at Hamamatsu Technical School. I didn't care that I was older than most students, or that I had grease under my fingernails and a stubborn country accent. I sat in the back, took notes, asked questions, and then went back to my workshop at night to test what I'd learned. Eventually, I cracked it. I changed the alloy composition, improved the molding process, controlled the temperature during annealing. The new rings held under pressure, stayed round under stress, and Toyota finally gave me a chance. I landed a contract to supply their engines. It was a breakthrough. I built a small factory, hired workers, and for a while, it looked like things were finally turning. But then came the war. World War II changed everything. Resources dried up, steel was rationed, men were drafted, factories were repurposed for military production. I had no choice but to adapt. We began making propeller parts for aircraft. I didn't love it, but I did what I had to do to keep the business alive. Then, in 1945, my factory was bombed, flattened by US air raids. All my machines, my tools, my hard work reduced to rubble. And if that wasn't enough, a massive earthquake struck Shizuoka shortly after. What little remained was destroyed. I remember standing in the ruins, soot in my lungs, concrete dust in my hair, the bitter taste of failure in my mouth. That was the lowest moment of my life. I could have quit. Many did. I could have said, "The world is burning. Why bother?" But even in the ashes, I heard the echo of that engine from my childhood. That first car, that first dream. So I gathered the remains of my machinery and sold them as scrap to Toyota. With the money, I bought rice, traded it for alcohol, then traded the alcohol for building materials. Piece by piece, I rebuilt my life. Not the factory, not yet, but my will. And here's the thing, my child. Sometimes life will burn down everything you've made. Not once, but twice. Your work, your savings, your plans. And when it does, you'll have a choice. To stop or to start over. What would you choose? When the war ended, Japan was in ruins. People were starving. Cities were silent, except for the sound of hunger and sorrow. No one needed piston rings. But you know what they did need? Transportation. Cheap, reliable, personal transportation. I saw housewives walking miles just to get groceries. Factory workers riding bicycles for hours. So I had another idea. What if we attached a small engine to a bicycle? I dug through the rubble, salvaged parts, and built a prototype. It was ugly, loud, smelled of burnt oil, but it worked. It moved, and people smiled. That small, clunky bicycle engine would soon become the first product of my new company, the Honda Motor Company. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me end this chapter with a question. If your dreams are reduced to ashes and all you have left are your two hands and your stubbornness, can that be enough? For me, it was. Because failure is never final unless you decide to stop trying. And I wasn't finished yet. The war had ended, but the real battle was just beginning. Japan was broken, cities flattened, factories gone, spirits low. There were no jobs, no fuel, and almost no hope. But among the rubble, people still needed to move, to eat, to work, to rebuild. And all across the country, you could see them, riding bicycles, wobbling under sacks of rice or bags of tools, sweating in the sun. That's when I knew, if I could ease their burden, even just a little, then I had a purpose again. I still remember the first one. We called it the Bata Bata because of the sound it made when it ran. It was a tiny 50cc engine I bolted onto a bicycle frame, using leftover generator motors from military radios. The thing shook like a scared dog and sounded like a can full of angry bees. But it worked. You pedaled, gave it a little throttle, and off it went. For the first time since the war, people could ride without exhaustion. They could go farther, faster. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't clean, but it solved a problem. And that, always, was the root of my inventions. Usefulness. If you were me, would you chase perfection first? Or build what people needed now? I chose to build what people needed. And I did it fast. In 1946, I scraped together what little capital I had left and formed a new company, Honda Technical Research Institute. Just me and 12 workers in a tiny shack. No luxuries, just tools, grease, hunger, and vision. We made 500 of those first bicycle engines, then 1,000, then 2,000. But soon the military surplus motors ran out. We couldn't just recycle anymore. We had to build our own. That's when I said, enough modifying. Let's make an engine from scratch. It was a terrifying decision. Remember, I had failed with piston rings before. I wasn't a formally trained engineer, but I had hands that knew metal like a farmer knows soil. I had ears tuned to every rattle and knock, and I had failure behind me, pushing me forward. We designed our own 50cc engine, named it the A-Type, mounted it on a reinforced bicycle frame, and sold it as the Honda motorized bicycle. It was ugly. It was heavy, but it was ours. And it sold. We couldn't make them fast enough. Mechanics from all over came knocking. Housewives sent letters asking when new models would be available. My factory, if you could even call it that, was filled with the clanging of metal, the smell of oil, and the soft murmurs of hope. In 1948, I took the next step. I dissolved the Research Institute and founded the company that would carry my name, Honda Motor Company Limited. A big name for such a small outfit. But I didn't see small. I saw what could be. I brought on a brilliant engineer named Takeo Fujisawa. We were opposites. He handled the business, I handled the machines. But we shared one thing, a belief that engineering and purpose must always walk side by side. Without him, Honda would not be what it is. We didn't agree on everything. We fought. We laughed. We pushed each other. He kept my feet on the ground when my head was in the clouds. Our first real motorcycle, the Model D, launched in 1949. D stood for Dream. A 98 cubic centimeter engine with a proper frame, designed from scratch. Not a modified bicycle anymore, but a true machine. It wasn't perfect, but it ran well, and it looked sharp. It gave people pride to own one. And in those days, after so much hardship, pride mattered. From there, things moved fast. We set up better production lines, hired real staff, painted the walls of the factory white so workers could see the grease they spilled. I told everyone, clean workplace, clean mind. It was unusual in those days, but it made a difference. Morale rose. Quality rose. We began to dream bigger. Not just Japan, the world. Let me ask you something. If you'd been through what I had, bombings, bankruptcy, rejection, broken bones, would you still believe you could reach beyond your country's borders? I did. But I also never forgot why we existed. To serve the people. That's why our engines had to be affordable, simple to fix, and reliable as the sunrise. I visited dealers myself, rode the bikes up and down the country roads, listened to customers. One old man told me, "Your motorcycle lets me see my grandchildren without walking 3 hours." That was more valuable than any trophy. Somewhere in those early years, people started saying I had vision, that I was a genius. But I laughed. A genius? Number just a mechanic with a stubborn streak and an ear for engines. All I did was listen. To the machines. To the people. To the moment. And that listening would soon lead me to our greatest success yet. The Super Cub. But we'll get to that soon. For now, let me leave you with this. Sometimes, changing the world doesn't start with a big idea. It starts with a small engine, bolted to an old bicycle, built by a man who refused to give up. By the early 1950s, Japan had changed. The country was rising from the ashes, slowly, stubbornly, like grass pushing through cracked cement. Factories hummed again, cities rebuilt, people smiled more, still tired, still poor, but rebuilding. And in that moment, something in me whispered, "This is the time." We had built motorcycles, real ones, from scratch. But I knew that wasn't enough. The people still needed something simpler, something for everyone, not just for young men with grease on their hands and thrill in their hearts, but for mothers, teachers, shopkeepers, for people who didn't care about horsepower or exhaust notes. They just wanted to go from point A to point B without breaking their back or their wallet. So I imagined a new kind of machine. Light, friendly, reliable, easy to ride, easy to fix. A vehicle you didn't fear, but welcomed. A motorcycle so approachable your grandmother could ride it. We called it the Super Cub. And from the moment that name left my lips, I felt something shift in the air. Designing it wasn't easy. We tore up every assumption about motorcycles. We gave it a step-through frame so you didn't have to throw your leg over the seat. We made the clutch automatic, so even if you'd never touched a gear in your life, you could ride it in 5 minutes. It had a 50cc engine, small and quiet, but strong enough to carry groceries and a passenger. Most importantly, it was durable. You could drop it, crash it, forget to change the oil, and it would still start the next day. That wasn't luck. That was hours, weeks, years of refinement. We tested it on dirt roads, in the rain, over gravel. I made engineers ride it until their backs ached and their teeth rattled. Not to be cruel, but to be sure. Because in this machine, I saw something bigger than metal and wheels. I saw the first real bridge between ordinary life and freedom. And let me tell you, when you build something for the people, not for your ego, the people feel it. The Super Cub launched in 1958. We didn't use flashy ads. We didn't target thrill seekers. Instead, we put it in front of housewives, students, elderly farmers. We said, "You can ride this too." It was revolutionary. Sales exploded. Within years, it became the best-selling motor vehicle in history. Not just in Japan, but across Asia, Africa, Latin America, even America. That small 50cc engine, it changed the world. And still, some called it a toy. I didn't argue, I just smiled. Because what is a toy, really, if not something that brings joy? If you were me, told for years that only serious machines matter, would you build something so gentle, so quiet, so modest? I did, and I never regretted it. We started exporting it across Asia. In places where roads were nothing but mud tracks, the Super Cub became a lifeline. I remember visiting a village in Thailand where a school teacher told me she used it to carry books, food, and once even a goat. She laughed when she said it. I laughed too. That was the real victory. But success is a tricky thing. It grows, it spreads, and if you're not careful, it swells into pride. I had to remind myself daily, this isn't about me, it's about usefulness. So we kept improving the Cub. Better brakes, more efficient engines, but never complicating the design. Simplicity was the soul of it. We created training manuals that even a teenager could understand. We offered parts at low prices so anyone could repair theirs. And if a customer wasn't happy, we listened. We changed. That's how you earn trust. Not just once, but again and again. One of my proudest moments came not from sales numbers or awards, but from a letter. It came from a nurse in Indonesia. She said, "Your motorcycle helps me visit my patients, even in the rain. Because of it, I can save lives." What do you say to that? You bow your head, and you keep working. By the 1960s, Honda was the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world. From a man tinkering with bicycle engines in a burned-out shack, to factories buzzing in Japan, Thailand, America. We had built something that lasted. something people could depend on. But still, I wasn't satisfied because motorcycles were just the beginning. The engine was whispering again. This time it said, "Go further." Cars. That was the next dream. Not giant, bulky beasts like American muscle cars, but small, efficient, human-scale vehicles. Vehicles made for crowded cities and narrow alleys. Something that could give ordinary people the dignity of driving their own car. People said I was crazy. "You're a motorcycle guy. Stay in your lane." But when have I ever listened to that? Let me ask you, if you had built one empire, would you stop there? Or would you try once more to start from zero? I didn't stop, because I still believed the machine could bring us closer, and that belief would take us to America next, to places where no one believed a Japanese company could survive. But that's for the next chapter. For now, remember this. Greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it hums beneath you on two wheels, quietly helping you go just a little further than you did yesterday. By the early 1960s, the name Honda was known across Japan and much of Asia. The Super Cub had become part of the landscape, like rice fields, telephone poles, and temple bells. But I wasn't satisfied with being a domestic success. Not out of pride, no, but because I believed something very deeply. If your invention is truly good, it should serve people everywhere. And so we turned our gaze west, toward the United States of America. Now, I must be honest with you. At that time, the idea of a Japanese company selling motorcycles in the US sounded like a joke. Japan was still recovering from the war, and in the eyes of many Americans, we were just that, former enemies. Our factories were tiny, our accents thick, our wallets thin. But I didn't let that stop me. In 1959, we opened American Honda Motor Company in a small office in Los Angeles. Just 6 employees, a single pickup truck, no dealer network, no brand recognition, no chance, or so people thought. We brought over the Super Cub, renamed it the Honda 50 for the US market. Simple, quiet, small. It looked nothing like the big Harley-Davidsons Americans loved. People laughed, said it was a toy, a bicycle with an engine. No real man would ride that, they said. So we changed the conversation. We launched an advertising campaign that made history. You meet the nicest people on a Honda. That one sentence changed everything. It wasn't just an ad, it was a revolution. It showed college students, housewives, young professionals, not rebels in leather jackets, but ordinary, happy people enjoying life. We redefined what a motorcycle meant. It was no longer about danger or rebellion. It was about freedom, fun, and practicality. Sales exploded. Within 5 years, we were the top motorcycle brand in America. Let me say that again. A Japanese company became #1 in the land of the free, where no one expected us to survive. But we didn't stop there. Because all this time, I had been dreaming of cars. Ever since my early days in Hamamatsu, I believed that small, fuel-efficient cars had a future. While the Americans loved big engines and flashy designs, I wanted to build something lean, reliable, and purposeful. So we did. We developed the Honda N360, a compact car with a 2-cylinder engine. It looked like a toy next to American sedans, but it was efficient, easy to park, and economical. In Japan, it became a hit. And then, slowly, we brought it to other markets. There were skeptics, of course. They always come with every new idea. But I had long since stopped listening to them. We followed with models like the Civic in the 1970s. That car, it was special. Small but tough. Clean running, fuel efficient at a time when the world was waking up to fuel crises and environmental issues. We didn't build it to chase trends. We built it because it was right. And once again, the world noticed. Honda became a trusted name in cars, not just bikes. Our engines, which I always treated as the heart of the machine, were praised for their durability and design. I insisted that every engine be something you could fall in love with. Smooth, responsive, precise. Even now, decades later, some people still drive old Civics that refuse to die. That makes me smile. But it wasn't just about products. It was about how we did things. In America, we opened factories, not just showrooms. We didn't want to be seen as foreign. We wanted to contribute, to create jobs, to train workers, to learn from local cultures. That's why we established production plants in places like Ohio. We hired American workers, trained them, trusted them. And you know what? They built some of the finest Hondas I've ever seen. Let me ask you something. If you were me, would you have stayed home, comfortable in your local success? Or would you cross oceans, face skepticism, and risk failure all over again? I crossed oceans. Because to me, borders are not barriers. They are invitations. An invitation to serve more people. And if your invention can bring joy or relief or convenience to someone far away, you go. You pack your bags, you carry your wrenches, and you go. Of course, not everything went smoothly. We faced lawsuits, supply issues, language gaps. Sometimes we stumbled. Sometimes we embarrassed ourselves. But we learned, and we improved. And above all, we kept our promises. That's what earned us loyalty. At night, I would think back to the barefoot boy chasing that car down the dirt road in Tenryu. Would he believe that one day his name would sit on a sign outside an American factory? I think he'd laugh, then grab a wrench and start helping. In the background of all this, my passion for racing never disappeared. Even as Honda entered the car business, I kept one eye on the racetrack. Speed was still in my blood. But we'll get to that in the next chapter. For now, remember this. The world will always tell you what you can't do. And sometimes, you need to smile, nod, and then do it anyway. Even with the factories running, the dealerships expanding, and the Honda name reaching every corner of the world, I never forgot the sound of an engine pushed to its limit. Racing, true racing, was never just a hobby for me. It was a laboratory, a proving ground, a mirror that never lied. You see, when you race, you strip away the excuses. There's no marketing, no clever slogans, just machine against machine, driver against driver, pure performance. That's where engineering shows its soul. Back in the 1960s, most Japanese companies didn't dare enter the world of international motorsport. It was expensive, it was dangerous, and quite frankly, it was dominated by Europeans and Americans. But I said, why not us? And so we began. In 1964, Honda entered Formula One. Let me say that again, just to let it settle in. A company that had started by strapping an engine to a bicycle entered the pinnacle of global motorsport. People laughed. They said we didn't belong. that our cars were too simple, our engines too small, that we didn't understand what it took to win at that level. But I've heard that all my life. When they said I couldn't make piston rings, I proved them wrong. And when they said motorcycles were too risky, I sold millions. And now they said we couldn't race. So we built our own chassis, designed our own engines, traveled to Europe, entered the circuits, and stood next to the giants. In 1965, we won our first Formula One race in Mexico. That moment, it wasn't just about speed, it was about pride. It was about every factory worker in Hamamatsu, every mechanic who wiped sweat from his brow, every engineer who stayed up all night calculating piston angles and fuel ratios. It was for them. But racing wasn't just about glory. It was where we tested technology that would later go into everyday vehicles. Variable valve timing, lightweight materials, engine cooling systems, all of it born from the crucible of speed. If you were me, would you have taken that risk? Spent millions just to race a few laps against the best in the world? I did, because I believed in the value of pressure. Diamonds form under it. So do great machines. But we didn't stop at Formula One. We entered motocross, endurance races, Isle of Man TT, legendary events. We learned from every loss, celebrated every win, and let it all shape the way we built our engines. We were never just racing, we were listening. In the 1980s, we returned to Formula One with a vengeance. This time, as an engine supplier for McLaren. And together, we created something magical. Our engines powered legends, Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, two of the greatest drivers in history, tearing down tracks with Honda technology behind them. We dominated the sport. People stopped laughing. Instead, they started copying. But success always brings tension. During those years, I began stepping back from day-to-day operations. Younger engineers, newer minds were rising. And that was good. A company must grow beyond its founder. It must walk on its own. Still, I stayed close to racing. I visited tracks, listened to engine notes like an old musician listening for a perfect chord. I'd watch the team, not to judge, but to feel proud. Because these people, they had taken the dream further than I ever could alone. And that's how it should be. Let me tell you something few people understand. When you love machines as I do, you don't just build them. You raise them. Like children. You nurture the spark of combustion. You teach them discipline. And then one day, you step aside and let them run free. We kept racing, but we also used what we learned. Our road cars improved. Our motorcycles grew sharper, safer. Racing didn't just push us forward, it kept us honest. Because the racetrack doesn't care about your reputation, only your performance. If you're young now, if you're building something new, let me say this: find your own racetrack. It doesn't need to have curves and rubber and gasoline. It can be your art, your code, your classroom. Just somewhere you test yourself against the world, not for applause, but for growth. I often asked myself, if I were born in a different time, a different country, would I still chase engines? And the answer was always yes. Because racing wasn't just about cars, it was about me, about never accepting good enough, about knowing there's always a little more performance to find, if you're willing to go deeper. Racing taught me that limits are just invitations, and that every defeat is a blueprint for the next victory. So even as I aged, Even as my hands grew stiff and my hearing began to fade, I never stopped listening to engines. Because even in the tremble of a piston, I heard something sacred: progress. By the late 1980s, I had stepped away from the day-to-day control of Honda Motor Company. The name on the building was still mine, but the hands at the levers now belonged to the next generation. Engineers, designers, and leaders who had grown up not with hunger and war, but with vision and possibility. And yet, I still came to work. Not every day, not to give orders, just to observe, to walk the factory floor, talk to the workers, place my hand on a warm engine block and feel it pulsing with life. I didn't need a title anymore. I was no longer president. I was simply Soichiro, the mechanic, the dreamer. And in those quiet visits, I found peace. I watched as Honda expanded across the globe. Plants in America, Europe, Southeast Asia. We were building more than just vehicles. We were building relationships, systems, and a culture. That was what made me most proud. Because if you build a company only around products, it dies when those products go out of style. But if you build a company around people, curious, driven, ethical people, then it can weather any storm. I saw the Civic evolve, the Accord become a household name. I saw the launch of Acura, our luxury brand, in the United States, something no one would have imagined when I was fixing bicycle tires with my father. We had gone from a shack in Hamamatsu to the global stage, competing with the biggest automakers in the world, and winning. But there's a strange loneliness in success. You spend your life climbing the mountain. Then you reach the top. And when you turn around to look at the path behind you, you see all the faces who helped you get there. Some are still beside you. Others, long gone. My father never saw the company I built. My mother, too. My early mentors, gone. Even Fujisawa-san, my great partner in this journey, passed in 1988. When I stood at his funeral, I remembered all our arguments, all our laughter. We were like two gears, sometimes grinding, but always in motion together. Without him, Honda might have remained a workshop. With him, it became a movement. I began to think more about legacy, not just what I had made, but what I would leave behind. The real question every old man eventually asks himself: did it matter? And then one day, I visited a school, a small one in a rural area. They had built a science lab using funds from a Honda community grant. The children showed me their inventions: solar panels, wind turbines made from scrap. One boy asked if I was really that Honda. I said yes. He looked up and whispered, "I want to make things that help people too." I smiled, and I felt something in my chest loosen. That was it. That was the purpose of it all. Not the profits, not the trophies, not even the machines, but the idea that a life spent in service to others, through engineering, through creativity, through perseverance, could inspire. If you were me, nearing the twilight of your life, with your body slowing down, but your mind still chasing pistons and valves, would you rest? Or would you keep finding ways to ignite the next generation? I chose to ignite. Even as my health declined in the 1990s, I stayed involved in education. I gave talks. I met with young engineers. I answered letters from students who sent me their drawings. I told them what I wish someone had told me when I was 10. Don't worry about being perfect. Just be curious. Be useful. I never wanted statues or buildings named after me. That's not my style. But I did want something quieter, better designed machines, kinder factories, bolder questions, and yes, a world where even the son of a blacksmith from a dusty village could dream of changing the world and do it. In my final years, I sat often in my garden. I liked to listen to the breeze, the sound of birds, the distant hum of a motorcycle on the highway. That sound, it still gave me chills, because to most people, it's just noise. But to me, it's proof that an idea, once forged in sweat and steel, can outlive the man who dreamed it. So if you're young now, wondering if your work will ever matter, let me say this: keep going. Even if no one understands you now, even if you fail 100 times, keep going. Because one day, someone will ride on the machine you built. Someone will be carried by your idea, and they might never know your name, but they will feel your intention. That is enough. The last stretch of the journey always feels the longest. Not because it's hard, but because the quiet finally catches up with you. By the mid-1990s, my health was fading. The long days in the garage, the sleepless nights chasing engine specs, the adrenaline of racing, it had all taken its toll. My hearing wasn't what it used to be, my joints stiff, my eyesight blurry around the edges. But my mind was still sharp as a forged crankshaft. I found myself reflecting more. I didn't fear death. I had met danger many times in my life, on racetracks, in factory explosions, in air raids. I had already shaken hands with fate and walked away. What I felt now wasn't fear. It was curiosity. How would the world go on without me? Would the machines still hum? Would the young still dream? In 1991, I passed the baton for good. Fully retired, I no longer had a seat at the board table, and that was right. Companies are living organisms. They must breathe, change, evolve. The founder is just the seed. The forest must grow without his shadow choking the light. I spent my final years quietly, but not idly. I supported arts and education. I walked my gardens. I tinkered with old tools. I read every letter people sent me, even if my hands couldn't write back anymore. Sometimes I'd visit a dealership and just stand at the edge, listening, watching the expressions on people's faces as they sat in a Honda Civic or placed a helmet on their head before testing a new motorcycle. That was my real paycheck. Not money, not awards. That look. The look of possibility. In my final days, when I lay still in my bed, a few close friends came to see me. Engineers, mechanics, designers. One of them asked, "Soichiro-san, what is your greatest invention?" I smiled. It wasn't a machine. It was hope. Hope made of steel. Hope wrapped in plastic and aluminum. Hope with tires and gears and dreams tucked into the gas tank. My final breath came on August 5th, 1991. And even as my lungs gave way, I could hear it, that same familiar sound. An engine faint in the distance, not a roar, a hum, steady, honest, moving forward. That was enough. Now let me leave you with one last whisper. Something soft and real. The most important thing I ever learned wasn't how to tune an engine, or win a race, or build a factory. It was this: perfection is not a place. It is a direction. You don't chase greatness to impress others. You chase it because the world deserves your best. You fall. You get back up. You cry. You build again. One weld at a time. One bolt at a time. Until even the smallest invention changes someone's life. And if you live like that, then even when you're gone, you're never really gone. So now, dear listener, let me speak not as Honda Soichiro, the engineer, not the businessman or the racer, just as an old man whose journey has come full circle. If you've stayed with me through this story, then perhaps you felt it too, that quiet rhythm of life, the rise, the fall, the rebuild. You see, life isn't about one grand moment. It's made of small choices, tiny repairs, gentle nudges forward. Whether you're tightening a bolt or planting an idea in someone's heart, those are the true revolutions. What I leave behind isn't just machines. It's a way of thinking, a belief that every obstacle contains a lesson. That stubbornness, when guided by purpose, becomes strength. That even failure, especially failure, is a kind of teacher. The company I helped build, Honda, is still out there, still learning, still growing. New hands now guide it, new ideas, new roads, and that's exactly as it should be. I've seen them build hybrids, electric cars, even jets. When I think of all that, I smile. Because that little boy from Tenryu, barefoot, curious, chasing that car down a dusty road, he never wanted to conquer the world. He just wanted to understand it. And somehow, through engines and gears, he did. To my children, my grandchildren, and all those who carry forward this work, don't be afraid to start small. Don't wait until you know everything. Begin now, with what you have. Even if it's just a broken part and an idea. And if one day you hear an engine pass by, or the sound of metal being shaped in a workshop, maybe, just maybe, you'll remember me. The old man who believed in dreams made of steel. So now, close your eyes, take a breath, and drift softly into the hum of the world, always in motion. Sweet dreams.